Join us today as we discuss the founding of the clans trilogy for BattleTech. Welcome back, everybody, and all you new folks out there who have stumbled upon us somehow, some way, thanks to the great algorithm and its mysterious ways.
Yes, the great algorithm.
Speaking of which, we would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe, hit the like button, comment, and share. In fact, subscriptions are nice, but those last two,
Really good.
yeah, because we do respond to the comments, and we do read them. We do try to incorporate things that we read in them into the future videos, and that is our method of interaction at the moment. So,
Yes.
and we do look for that, and liking, obviously, because then other people will get to see this fabulous content.
The more people that like the video, the more people will see the video.
Exactly. So, today we're going to be doing a review for a book trilogy for BattleTech. And this is the Founding of the Clans trilogy, written by Randall Bills. Who's Randall? Yeah. And, yeah, these books have been very long in the making. There's a whole backstory to how long these books have taken. The third book in particular, as I understand it, and I hope I'm getting all this correct here, he wrote the first two books, and they were published in German, but I believe not in English. And then finally, as part of the Kickstarter campaign, the Clan Invasion Kickstarter, since the Mercenaries campaign is upcoming, I do need to distinguish for those of you watching this in the future. The third book was a stretch goal. Basically, hey, we make this much money, we're gonna kick Randall into gear and tell him, hey, it's time to finish the trilogy. So, along with writing the third book, he also updated the text of the first two to take into account various bits of lore that have accumulated in the, I believe, 2 decades, if I recall correctly, since he wrote these two. So they're not 100% like the German versions. There are updates and changes. I have no idea what those changes are because I never read the German versions.
This one's copyright is 2021.
Yeah.
And that one's 2022.
I know.
Year difference, Bobby. Not 2 decades.
That's this version in English. Like, you copyright this book. Like, read the foreword if you really want all the details. It's all in there.
I don't got that time for a video.
Well, then don't.
I was just looking at the copyright dates because
Well,
you were bringing that up.
And if you read these books, as I'm going to suggest, spoiler alert, I'm going to suggest you read them. They are good. The foreword explains the whole situation better than I could, and it's several pages. So anyway, like I said, these are the founding of the clans. So this represents from the end of the Amorous coup up to the end of Operation Klondike, which was the reconquest of the Pentagon worlds. And I'm going to explain each as we go through the explanations for the books what all that means, because that could be total gibberish to you at this moment. And also, I want to throw out a note.
I know what some of that is.
Well, hopefully you'll understand what all of it is by the time we're done. And just as a small note, looking at some of our content, I have come to realize that there was probably a better approach to some of it, and so we are going to do we are still going to do the deep dives into the various factions like we promised. But there's a couple like kind of overarching big picture, really explaining some things in detail videos that I want to do first, so that there's a much better explanation for the lore instead of just saying like the clans. Well, some of you out there are like, that's great, I'm new to BattleTech. What the hell are the clans? Who are these people? Are they people? You probably have
Somewhat people.
You probably have all kinds of questions like that I realize none of our videos have really actually tackled. So I want to do those first, and this is part of it. So here we go. like I said, from what the time frame this covers, the main character in these books is Andrei Kerensky. He is the younger son of General Alexander Kerensky, who was the commander of the Star League Defense Force during the fall of the Star League.
Also the guy that wanted the Atlas made.
Yeah. Yes. Although he himself drove an Orion.
He's the one that said we needed the Atlas and got the Atlas made, though.
Eventually, yeah. But in combat, he used an Orion. Anyway, so this book, the first in the trilogy, focuses on the time from the beginning of the Exodus, which is whenever this would be after the Amorous coup was put down. The Star League was no more because House Cameron was every member of House Cameron that we know of probably was killed by Stefan Amorous in his coup. And then it took the Star League Defense Force several years to destroy Amorous's support structure in the Outer Rim before finally driving into the center of the Inner Sphere to Terra and having to fight his forces there. And I should have written this down, but this book actually explains, there's a quote in this book that talks about the forces that were lost to achieve this. And it's staggering. It's numbers that later points in the timeline.
Those numbers?
No, that's what Chad is pointing to here on the back. This is just the result of the coup and the Civil War. There were 100 million people left dead, 500 million wounded, and 1 billion homeless. That's primarily just in the Terran hegemony, because the war never really spilled out into the houses. They just kind of sat it out while building up their armies, waiting to scavenge and pick apart the remains. So, but yeah, I'll in a later video, when I get to the nuts and bolts of things, I'll get the quote from this. But it's levels of forces that I'm pretty sure don't even exist in later parts of the timeline, as far as the numbers of mechs and warships and soldiers lost. So, like I said, the primary character is Andrei Kerensky. His older brother is Nicholas Kerensky. He's the one known as the founder of the clans. But as these books show, Andrei had a hand in large parts of the founding of the clans, and was definitely like almost a sounding board of sorts for Nicholas, even though he didn't realize it at the time. He thought his brother was a cold-blooded bastard. In fact, I think about the only emotion you really see from Nicholas is in the third book, like the last chapter of the book. And I'll get to that here in a moment. Obviously, there's going to be some spoilers here, folks. So this covers the beginning of the Exodus, which is once it was obvious the Star League was going to collapse, and that the House Lords were all just going to declare themselves the new Star Lord, the new Lord of the Star League, which was going to lead to infighting among all 5 of them. Alexander Kerensky knew that he could not keep the Star League Defense Force intact. It was already starting to break up. People were going back to their home territories. They were turning mercenary. And he wasn't going to see these people that he had led and fought and bled next to just fall into what was going to end up becoming the largest war mankind had ever seen. And would, in fact, make the war that much worse, because it would be that much more machinery and personnel added to the war efforts. So he was able to convince a large portion, I believe it's something around 80%, of what was left, because several units had already disbanded, to follow him on an exodus beyond known human space. So they struck out in a direction where, if you look on any of the star charts, the maps, essentially, if you follow the line between like House Kirita and House Steiner, head that way.
I think that's generally referred to as Galactic North.
Yeah, the way the map's always positioned, I would say so, yeah. So,
I mean, it's the easiest way to look at it. For us who are used to...
Yeah, we're using a 2-dimensional map to...
with a compass available.
Yeah, because it's always called the inner sphere, but it's always depicted as a circle. There's no depth to the map, even though there should be. But that's impossible with a two-dimensional surface. So
they'd have to give us a hologram at that point.
right, which is what they use in the BattleTech universe. Just we don't have those.
We could use that hologram, folks.
Yeah. So anyway, so the Exodus fleet, they leave. The last stop they make, they grab the guy from House Kirita, who comes aboard to inspect things. They're like, yeah, we can't have you going back and talking, so welcome aboard, buddy. And so he gets stuck with them, and so he's got a whole story of his own.
Wow.
So as the fleet is going along, and also throughout these books, there's flashbacks to during the Amorous coup. And that's where you see Nicholas Kerensky's perspective, because he, his brother, and his mother, and the woman who eventually becomes his wife are all hiding out in Moscow. Because in case you couldn't tell by the name, they're Russians. Okay, Kerensky's it's a Russian name. And his father's a big fan of Russian literature, as you find out numerous times in references in these books.
What language were these two originally written in?
German.
Okay.
There's a huge BattleTech following in Germany. Don't know why, but there is.
Cool.
So anyway, during the Exodus, though, there's discontent because they're on these ships for over a year. Because, in case you haven't seen our other videos, the way faster than light travel works in BattleTech is you have what are called drop ships, which detach from a larger ship to go down to a planet's surface or move to a different jump ship or go to a space station or something. The larger ship is called a jump ship. The jump ship is the faster than light travel part. It can instantaneously go from point A to point B within 30 light years. However, once it does that, it then has to recharge the drive, and that takes approximately a week. Depending on where they are, they can either use their own internal reactor, although if I recall correctly, there's a problem trying to do that sometimes. I think it takes longer or something, but most of them have giant sails they unfurl to collect solar energy. Now, there's also the lithium-powered ones, which can make a double jump. So they can jump 60 light years in essence. However, it then takes them twice as long to recharge. So there's a trade-off. But anyway, so you're jumping 30 light years at a time, and then you got to charge for a week, then 30 light years and you got to charge for a week. Well, human-controlled space is over 1,000 light years from Earth. So you're talking quite a while just to get beyond the borders of known space, much less then to get far enough out in the void that no one's going to come after you, and then find inhabitable planets.
So that's something like 66 weeks to get out of human-controlled space alone.
Yeah, it probably takes a year. Yeah.
That's longer than a year.
Yeah, it's like 14 weeks longer than a year. Yeah. Yeah, it probably does. If I recall correctly from one of the other from the comments I've seen, whenever the clans that came for the invasion fleet took a year to get to the inner sphere.
Ooh.
So yeah, imagine that as your supply line. So anyway,
well, we're gonna send this bread to them. Hopefully, it don't spoil in the year it takes to get there.
Yeah. So despite that, they have instantaneous communication across any distance, though, because of the hyperpulse generators. In fact, if you're willing to pay Comstar enough, you can have a real-time conversation from one end of the inner sphere to the other, 2,000 light years distant, with no lag.
Isn't that something like billions of space bucks a second or something?
It's a lot of Comstar dollars, C-bills. But yeah, so anyway, so there's discontent, and one ship in particular seems to be the hotbed of activity, the Prinz Nguyen, and ultimately space mutiny erupts. Kerensky sends in the troops, smashes the mutiny, executes the leaders. Anderi kind of at one point is duped into going to the meetings, and so he gives it an air of legitimacy that it wouldn't have otherwise had, and eventually he realizes it was all his brother's doing. Nicholas knew there was going to be discontent, and so if he could focus it all in one spot and head it off at the pass while he could control it, he could make sure that the rest of the trip would go without flaws, unfazed. That's a recurring theme for what happens several times in these books. So anyway, after that, eventually they get to what are called the Pentagon worlds, 5 worlds in close proximity, and
5 habitable worlds.
Yes, 5 habitable worlds, and they start setting up shop there, and then the old grudges come out because no one quite planned to head to that moment of, so most of you were in the military, but we need farmers and shop workers and
scientists,
factory people now, so you're not all going to still be in the military. And some people didn't take too well to that. So eventually there's a massive uprising. Civil war spreads across the Pentagon worlds. Kerensky's second in command, De Chevalier, he gets taken down. That's whenever Kerensky mentally just starts really falling apart. And then the second exodus occurs, and this book ends as the second exodus is leaving the Pentagon worlds.
So is that where this one picks up?
This one picks up with them arriving on Strana Mekti, which is eventually the clan capital world. And they'd already had a colony there, because after they settled the Pentagon worlds, they had already begun searching for other habitable worlds, because they planned on rebuilding a whole society out in space. Well, a different part of space, because, we're all in space if you really think about it. Just on different rocks floating through the void. So...
way to go, emo there.
Well,
Gotta keep good thing neither of us are wearing black shirts.
Gotta keep it real, Chad. So, this one focuses on the beginning, the foundational moments for the clans. Kerensky Sr. dies. Nicholas seizes control. Obviously off his father's name, but also the fact he's displayed that he's a very competent commander. And he begins reorganizing all of society because he realized the reason things fell apart here was because everyone reverted to their old grudges. The Capellans and the Davians and the Curetans, it all fell into infighting. So his goal is to just do away with all of that and basically restart history, society. It's a very ambitious goal. And so piece by piece throughout the book, you see bits and pieces of it begin to be implemented. And I believe it's this one. These two are basically one singular narrative. But you see, first, they start just trying to reorder society. They start testing, because again, they have to winnow down the military, because again, most of the people that escaped were military people. So they've got to knock it down to a number they can control and support. And then there's the reordering of the rest of society to work for the military, ultimately. And so in all this is where the concept of the clans emerges, where all of their society is divided up among the 20 different clans. Each one he picks 800 warriors that made the cut, and he divides them up 40 into each of the clans, naming one of them the Khan of each clan. The Khan is the leader. The Sa Khan is the secondary leader. Now, I'll get into clan customs on that here in a moment. So, you'll notice a lot of the Khans are the older generals who have been around since the Star League. Including the rando Kiritan guy. He's the Khan of clan, I want to say Fire Mandrill.
Aww.
But I could be wrong on that. but I think it's the fire mandrills. And then no, the Jade Falcon Con is a woman, and she's like 80 years old, and she's got to be like you don't see it here. You do see it in the Operation Klondike source book. She's got to be one of the toughest people in the clan homeworlds, like by bar none. She's tough. But anyway, uh, so and I'm sure it's intentional because they have the battlefield experience. They have the leadership experience. And you see each of them in their own way trying to embrace the concept of the totem animal and trying to like shape the clan. You see the foundational moments for each of the clans and their later doctrines that you see play out 300 years later in the invasion. And yeah, like you see the Jaguars start with the heavy hand of Khan Osis, who during Operation Klondike is all about, well, we can't retake the city, just bomb it from orbit, which is what happens 300 years later at Turtle Bay, and it's why the Smoke Jaguars get annihilated by the Inner Sphere. So, so you see a lot of little steps like that. Excuse me. But also a lot of stuff with Anderi, and he feels constantly outside of things because his brother, and his brother's wife are not members of any of the clans. His brother's the IlClan, the Khan of Khans. Okay, he's the ruler. And he's told the clans, after Operation Klondike, whichever clan performs most admirably, that'll be the one that he joins and gives his genetic material to. And he says that his wife and Anderi can choose however they're going to choose, but they're also going to be in the genetic program. Anderi, it should be noted, I don't think he's married to, but he's in love with the Khan of Clan Coyote, and she has visions, so she knows what's going to happen at the end of the third book. Yeah, so as the books pass, you see that Anderi is continually manipulated by his brother into doing certain things, but also that that ideas he has do become part of the foundation of the clans. Like, while his brother's busy building everything, his job is to train soldiers at the academy. So by the time the clans actually form, something like 90% of the members of the clans have been trained by Nicholas Kerensky's brother. So his training methods are the foundational point of the clan training method, 300 years later. And there's various points where he realizes that what his brother's building is going to last centuries, and openly contemplates just how much blood, death, and destruction is going to result from all of it. And also realizes that there might not be any other possibility for them to survive, so he goes along with it. So all this builds up to what happens in Book 3, which is where Operation Klondike occurs. And that is where the clans, after 20 years on Stronamecti, now they've reorganized, they've got some new weapons, their mechs are all in pristine condition, they got the supplies, they've got the intel, they go to retake the Pentagon worlds. And so they fight among themselves to determine who's going to go for which planet and everything. And you see the beginnings of the challenge system that the clans use. Instead of leading to full open conflict, the goal is to make it so that it's a fight between equals, and if they're not equal, to figure out how to equalize it and to let combat determine the outcome. It doesn't always have to be combat. There's instances where it's literally a coin toss is what they agree on. Some it's American football, some it's a hand-to-hand fight, some it's a knife fight, sometimes it's a mech fight.
What about a thumb wrestling match?
That would be a possibility. I believe it's, if I challenge you, you pick the arena of the challenge. And we have to agree to what we think is even. Because one of the other books, there's a guy who fights someone that's got cyborg implement, has cybernetic arms, so he's naturally stronger. And so to compensate, the guy fights with one arm literally tied behind his back. So they agree that that's probably an equitable way to resolve it. So, yeah, the guy with the cybernetic arm kind of got screwed. The other guy read up on the cybernetic arms and figured out there's a weak point on him and was able to just like hit the thing just right to shut down his other arm. And so that's how he beat him. That was a good book. I'll have to do a review on that one too. I gotta remember the name of it though. But anyway, so Operation Klondike, they go and they retake the Pentagon worlds, and Kerensky's wife, who is every bit as dangerous and I don't want to say bloodthirsty, but cold blooded for sure, as Kerensky is, makes Andari realize that there's one final thing he can contribute to the clans, and that's to die as a martyr. And so he agrees because he's beginning to think that Nicholas is going to kill him at some point anyway. So he
I could see it.
So he sets up a scenario where there were some people from something that happened in this book that are still loyal specifically to Andari after they saw what he did. That they take up battle mechs from some of the people there on the Pentagon worlds. They pretend to be them, and they kill him. And then they themselves get destroyed by the clan forces. And so the final chapter in the book is whenever Nicholas confronts his wife, because he finally gets the report on what happened, and he can figure out real quick what happened. And he point blank finally just asks her, like, did you do this? Did you kill my brother? And she's like, not quite. She's like, I knocked the arrow, but he's the one that fired it.
That is never a good answer, folks.
And so this is the only time you really see emotion from Nicholas. Whenever like the full weight of the fact that his brother is dead, really hits him, and he's like, am I doomed? Is the same thing going to happen to me as what happened to my father? Once De Chevalier died, because that's if you read these books and you see the level of trust that Alexander had in De Chevalier, and you realize that's how Nicholas truly felt about his brother, even though you don't see it up to that moment. You realize that Nicholas really should have said something way before then, but the fact that he viewed his brother that way kind of comes out of left field from the way he behaves through most of these books. And so you see that his wife's like, he did this for you. Like, the Chevalier was taken from your father, and Eric gave himself for the cause. That's the difference. And he kind of hem hauls for a moment, but then he's ramrod steel spine back to the IlClan, and that's the only real time you see emotion from him like that. But the book also kind of hints that Andari can see there's going to be some issues with Clan Wolverine, and tries to tell his brother that take it easy on them. And so there's another book that I should do a review on that covers Clan Wolverine and their destruction. And again, it's the same concept that you see play out all these times. Kerensky sees that there's going to be a breakdown, and he encourages just enough to get just enough of the people involved all in one spot so he can just smash them ruthlessly. And that's what happens to Clan Wolverine. They get destroyed. And which is why very early on it goes to 19 clans. So, but it also heavily hinted that several survive. One of the interesting things, and I think it was in this book, it might have been this one, Andari is actually responsible for the existence of the Dark Caste. Because he warns his brother that there are people that they accept that clan society is what it is. They know they don't have an escape. They know there has to be structure and order. They just don't want to be part of it and bound by all the rules. And so he convinces his brother to not round them up and kill them, but to instead just kind of turn a blind eye to their existence and let them be on the fringes of society. And that's where the Dark Caste comes from. So one of the only times he actually convinces his brother to, be merciful. So, but overall, very well written. Gives you, real insight into a character that doesn't get any real screen time elsewhere. and yeah, like really leads you through the various steps. Now, there is a source book for Operation Klondike, and I'm going to do a little bit of an in-depth video on it at some point because it's one of the two source books that I have that I consider to be like it's the top. That one and the Wars of Reaving, which theoretically could be the beginning and the ends of the clans, depending on what happens later on. So, but yeah, and if you want to know what happens before this, you need to read the Liberation of Terra 1 and 2 source books. That details the retaking of Terra at the end of at the end of the Civil War. So, yeah. And then if you want to know what's happening in the Inner Sphere while these people are busy fighting and killing each other, you need to check out the First Succession War source book, where you get to read about the Inner Sphere bombing itself back to the Stone Age. So, yeah.
Got a quick question for you, Bob, because
Fire away, Chad.
I don't know if it's mentioned here. How did Alexander Kerensky decide who was going to end up being the warriors of the clans?
Well, Alexander didn't. He was dead. It's Nicholas.
Nicholas, sorry.
Extensive testing. And by that, to be clear, I mean live fire testing.
So, wouldn't that be sort of the start of where their trials come from?
I mean, I'm sure that played a part. But yeah, there's a part in the book where literally one person challenges another person to a trial. And even there, Andari's kind of like, oh, Jesus, I hope this doesn't take off. And, obviously we know it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you see that. One of the cons, I only mention this because of what subconscious thing because of what I just said here. One of the cons is also a preacher, Christian, and it's kind of interesting. I've got to read up on the clan he was the con of to see if any of that like really stuck or not.
Seafox.
Because he's concerned that eventually Nicholas is going to destroy his church because no religion before the clans kind of deal. But while he's alive, while the books go on, like his church is still around and he still has his people, and so I don't know because the clans, part of their society is clearly modeled after like a more socialistic, communistic approach where the state controls everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a sheer meritocracy of, you can fight really well, you're going to wind up at the top, as long as you're in the warrior caste. You're in the other caste, well...
You're always going to be second fiddle.
Yeah, unless you can somehow convince them to let you in. Well, that was another thing, was it took some doing, but Andari eventually convinces Nicholas, like, hey, you're going to need more than 800 people to retake the Pentagon worlds. You're going to need, like, infantry and ground support and all this. And so it's like, we need to build the auxiliaries. And then, also, this will double as, if one of the 800 falls, these were the people that were almost good enough. If they prove themselves, let them join in, So, that happens. And also in this book is where the Iron Wombs come online.
Ooh.
And that's the clans. Their whole deal is, and you see it. It's all in this one. Their ultimate goal in life is to die an honorable death, to have glory and honor heaped upon their name, because the 800, their genetics are taken and housed at the giant genetic repository on Stronamecti, and the scientist caste, they are responsible for creating the next generation of clan warriors. They're not born traditionally. They're not quite clones, but they're genetically made, and they're born from the Iron Wombs. They don't have an actual biological mother and father. They're pod people. Okay.
Ooh, they're like the Death Corps Krieg.
Yeah.
For you Warhammer 40k folks out there, they are like the Death Corps Krieg. So yeah.
Right, and so they go out, and in any given generation, they're allowed 25 warriors are allowed to claim the blood names for each of the clans, for each blood name. and that's based on if you're in their genetic line, you can try to fight a trial to win to be able to use their blood name. So you won't just be Warrior Bob. You'll be Bob, like if I was a Jade Falcon, like Chitsu or Hazen, someone like that. Malthus. Uh, those are various Jade Falcon blood names. If you're Clan Wolf, if you've got the genetics,
you could be a Kerensky.
you can be a Kerensky. So yeah. So, but it's clear that Nicholas tries to get almost everything cemented in place with the clans before Operation Klondike. And I'm assuming that's because he recognized there was at least a slim chance he could die. So he wanted to make sure that the system would survive his death. Because that's usually the biggest problem with a dictatorship, which is what this is once the dictator's dead, chaos. So he wanted to rebuild all the societal norms so it would all survive his death. Because he accepted that he was going to die. Like he's not a fool. He knows he's not immortal. But what he's building in his mind will hopefully last forever. But yeah, so that was an important bit that they cover in there, and it gets off to a very rough start. Like something like only half the kids survive the first batch, and obviously it improves as it goes along. But and there's a lottery held amongst the non-warriors because they need more than just the DNA of those 800 people.
Yeah, it's a small genetic pool.
Right. So there's a lottery held amongst the citizenry to also have their genetics included too, as just kind of base material to work with. Because for those of you that don't know anything about genetics, there's a number I've heard before. I think it's something like around 180,000, which is how many people you need to repopulate the Earth without getting into weird like cousin inbreeding within 3 or 4 generations, to have enough genetic diversity so that you can avoid that. So similar concept, only here they're controlling the genetics, so they probably don't need as many people.
So then do the civilians that were picked, that won their lottery, are their names part of the blood names?
No, the blood names are only the initial 800 for the longest time. Now, in the current era, this is way back when. The current era is now 400 years after this point. Okay, because the clans came back 300 years, and it's been 100 years since the clan invasion. I believe the Ghost Bears have incorporated the Rasslahag Dominion people that have earned it. I think they've actually there's also Rasslahag blood names now among the Ghost Bear Dominion.
Cool.
Because they've integrated to that point. And I was thinking there's one other clan that's done that, but I could be wrong. So it's not unheard of for new blood names to arise if there's people with worthy skill get brought in, because that's one of the other things the clans do. They don't want to waste anything. So if they fight an opponent and beat them, they can take that opponent on as what they call a bondsman and bring them into their clan. And if they prove themselves worthy, they will sever the cord. That's literally a bond cord. They'll sever the cord, and now they'll be a member of the warrior caste for that clan. And obviously, if they're not of the clan at all, then if they earn the right, their genetics will mingle with the genetics of the clan. So their name could become a blood name within the clan. But it's a rare occurrence. Now not among between the clans. Like if Clan Jade Falcon did that and absorbed a Kerensky, then theoretically they could just add the Kerensky blood name. Theoretically, I think there's a whole process. I think you have to actually fight a trial for the blood names if they're between the clans like that. So that's why there's only 2 clans that have the Kerensky blood name, I believe.
Wolf and
Coyote, I think, was the other one. Because, like I said, Andari, the woman he loved, was Clan Coyote. So I think this is half remembered reading on the internet. I'm probably getting this wrong. I believe Clan Coyote got Andari's genetics, so I believe they have the Kerensky blood name. Got to look that up, but I thinking that's true.
So, another question.
Yeah.
You said in this one the Iron Rooms came online.
Yes.
And started producing artificially created human beings.
Yes.
Are all clan society members from Iron Looms?
You know...
You brought up that the warriors are. But what about like the scientists or the farmers or the craftsmen?
I have to double check that. Because I haven't read one way or another whether that's true. Because I would have to think that the other casts are probably not. But at the same time, one of Kerensky's whole goals was to destroy the family unit as we understand it, so that people are loyal to the clan and not to the family, and having your own children and raising them would not do that. That would be counter to that goal. So I have to double check that. And also I know that with every batch of warriors that they hatch, terrible terms for human beings here, but
pop's a better term
for pod people. Not all of them, in fact, only like 10 or 20% of them actually become warriors, because like there's a very high threshold to be good enough to become a warrior. So all the rest either wash out or die.
What happens when they wash out?
They go to different castes. Some of them go like to the scientist caste if they have the aptitude. Some become laborers. Just depends. So yeah. So I know some of the other castes are from the Iron Wounds for sure. I just don't think all of them are. I don't think they're like 10 years from now we're gonna need 40 more laborers. Fire up a batch. I don't think it works that way. I think they're more freeborn, which is the clan term, by the way, for people from the inner sphere. Free births, because they're born normally. They also call them spheroids. But yeah, so like I said, I'll have to look that up, and I'll try to put an answer down in the comments, or I'll put a little thing up here somewhere. But yeah, I'll check that out.
So, like, in the formation of this, you said that... What was his name? Anderi?
Anderi, yeah.
Realized that they needed...
It looks like Andre, but
the R's in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
Alright. He realized they needed more than just 800 mech warriors. They needed infantry, all that. So, like, the threshold for the mech warriors is high.
Yes.
What about for like the infantry, the support people that drive the vehicles? And
I should.
Are they still part of the warrior caste, or?
They are. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And that's actually probably where a lot of those people that wash out of the mech warrior program wind up as infantry, as vehicle operators. Yeah, I'd forgotten that entirely. But yeah, because the whole goal, the cream of the crop, are the mech warrior pilots. Okay, they're the top, because that takes the highest level of skill, physical aptitude, and everything like that. So the other folks are still part of the warrior caste. They're just not mech warriors. And it's possible, by the way, for other people in the warrior caste to rise to the rank of Khan. Like, it can happen. It's not always a mech warrior. Usually it's a mech warrior, but it's not always a mech warrior. Or you wind up with weird situations like where Clan Wolf had a non-clanner as the Khan.
What? Is this current guy?
No, well, the current guy, I don't know where his clan genetics come from.
He don't have clan genetics.
Yeah, he claims that he does, but if it is, it's because he's got more than 2 genetic donors.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll talk about him later. Not in this video. But, yeah, so you got that. And also, as the timeline advanced beyond where these books cover, the clan scientists eventually created 2 new phenotypes. The elementals, which are human beings who are 8 feet tall and just like pure brick house muscle.
They get power armor, folks.
Yeah. and the aerospace pilots who are shorter and a little bit rounder, so they can better absorb the G forces, and there's less surface area.
What? They're like short versions of us?
Kind of. And so, well, the deal is though, like if they go on in battle and do their thing, well, their genetics get used for the next generation, and not necessarily for, like
an aerospace pilot or an elemental.
Right. It's just the here's this batch. Some of them will clearly have elemental DNA.
I mean, like a mech pilot that's 7 foot tall, and you're going, how are you going to get into the cockpit?
Yeah. And so, like some of the cons later on clearly have elemental DNA, and you get weird things like that. You'll get a guy that didn't quite make the cut in the infantry that's like 8 feet tall versus everyone else, and
didn't quite make the cut in the infantry, built like a brick house, 8 feet tall.
Yeah,
and got shunted to the scientist cast.
Yeah, I mean you get weird things like that eventually.
I want to know how he didn't make the cut.
I mean, it happens, Could be a nerve thing. I don't know. Just he's got all the physical, but just the mental just wasn't there.
Cool.
It happens. Because that's the other thing. Like they're raised in groups, and then I think it's around 14, 15 is when they start like heavily training, like live fire training, and yeah.
I think that's a little late if you're wanting to make really great warriors.
Well, no, they have to advance to a certain point physically and mentally, because there's a lot of things you can start doing at 5 and 6, but what's it going to accomplish, versus you wait till they're ready to actually train, and then just that's all they do. Like there's no childhood for these people. It's training, and so by 20, they're ready to go and kill and fight, and by 25, they're ready to retire.
Retire, folks. By 25, about 70-80% of them's dead.
Yeah, if you're in the clan and you're still alive by I think it's 30 or 35, like you're kind of considered a failure because you didn't find your glorious.
You're considered an old man.
You didn't find your glorious death in battle, and they put you in like second line forces where you're not going to find your glorious death, so that the next batch of the youth can go out and get themselves killed in honorable ways. Yeah, clan society is beyond screwed up. It's definitely like the worst parts of all kinds of martial societies throughout history. A lot of the Mongols, a lot of the Spartans. I mean, it's a mess.
So it seems.
Also, minor little tidbit: their official language is English, not just any English.
American
English. So yeah,
so you get space warriors that are going, "Hey, y'all over there, bombard!"
Well, they wouldn't say that. There is an exception. They don't use contractions.
No.
So they wouldn't say.
If they're using American English, then they'd be saying like y'all and don't.
They wouldn't say y'all. They would say
can't, ain't, wouldn't, couldn't.
Yeah, they don't. They don't use contractions, and there's a handful of like weird clan terms they use.
That's shortened versions of other words.
Yes, which are shortened versions of other words, which,
you've contracted the word.
Yeah, like they'll say something, and they'll end it with they'll say "af," which is affirmative, but questioning like they're saying right, like in a questionable manner, or that's the answer "af," affirmative. Queen egg is another one, which is query negative, which is basically saying no in a questioning manner.
So how do they reply no?
I have no idea.
Do they just say no? Do they use quay-neg? Do they use neg?
Well, neg is also a term they use, short for negative.
So instead of just saying no, they go neg.
Yeah, and that's all actually because of Vanderi also. Like, he jokingly did it a couple times back at the academy, and it caught on among the students, and then kind of spread, and then, the 80% of the people he taught that wound up in the clans. And
he made jokes while training children.
And then his brother, embraced it and took it on. and the whole no contractions thing. And you can tell some of the cons specifically intentionally keep using contractions just to piss the others off too. It's hilarious. But yeah, and the cons don't all like each other in these books either. Like there's definitely some love lost between some of these characters. But yeah. Overall, great books. You should definitely read them if you're interested in the clans and how like their society was built. You know, and then like I said, if you want to know the details of the last half of this book, Operation Klondike, and it's an excellent source book all on its own. But definitely, if you want to know more about that, and then the book that takes place after this,
the Phantom book,
yeah, which we're going to do a review on it on its own, is Betrayal of Ideals, and that's where the fate of Clan Wolverine plays out. That book takes place far enough down the line that the Khan of Clan Wolverine, who I want to say was Sarah McAvity, either her Saw Khan or one of the higher ups anyway, is a pod person. Like it's far enough along the line, like the pod people are starting to fill in the ranks of the clans already, because they lose a lot of people in Operation Klondike, and
I wouldn't doubt that.
They also absorb a couple forces because a couple forces that are like still loyal to the Star League ideals that help them take down the other forces. So yeah, and ultimately all these people are absorbed into the clans.
So
one way or another.
There's something going back to the Exodus, the first Exodus.
Yeah.
Why didn't Kerensky just stay?
Because
he had the charisma to convince like some 80-odd% of the defense force to leave with him.
Here's what it came.
He should have been charismatic to be like, so we need to keep the peace, people. We're going to keep the houses from fighting each other here.
Okay.
We're going to keep the Star League going.
There's a couple problems. Number one, he absolutely refused to name himself First Lord, which would have been the only way that could have worked. Even de Chevalier was like, this is what you have to do. Like, you're the guy. Like, there's no Camerons left. Like, you're next. You're the closest thing to a leader that we have now. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that, because then I'm no better than Amorous. I'm no better than the usurper. Just naming myself leader. He's like, I'm not the leader. He's like, I'm not a Cameron. This isn't my position. I'm not going to do this. And he also seriously felt that he compromised himself. If I read the bits and pieces in this correctly, before this point, he said he'd already seriously compromised his morals. And I think what he meant was, after they retook Earth, he executed Amorous, but he also executed Amorous' entire family along with him. And I think that's what he meant, because it was one of those, like, he felt it had to be done to make sure there wasn't going to be some kind of weird reprisals later on, but also knew that it was an evil act, because it's not like the other people did anything.
Yeah.
So, but he felt it had to be done. And if I'm reading it correctly, that was his compromising his morals moment. He's like, and I'm not going to do it again to just be as bad as that bastard. So, he wouldn't do it. The First Lords couldn't pick among themselves. The House Lords couldn't pick among themselves who would be First Lord, because they're all going to vote for themselves. So, on top of that, the Terran hegemony was wrecked from the fighting. So, he's literally in the center, surrounded by enemies on all sides, that are going to be taking chunks out of the hegemony no matter what he does. His forces are probably going to start leaving. What's his real plan going to be? He doesn't have the legitimacy of actually being the heir. He's just a guy saying he's in charge now. His army might turn against him at that point, just on principle. He's in a destroyed realm, and he knows the five houses, that the war that's going to happen between them cannot be stopped, because before the Amorous coup, they had enough of a force that they could deal with one or two of the houses at the same time. After this, they'd be lucky if they could deal with one. much less all 5 of them gunning for them all at once. Because what happens in the background of all this, while Amorous is whispering sweet nothings into the ear of the last of the Camerons before the coup, all the other houses had managed to vote themselves and had the Cameron pass it to allow them to begin building up their militaries above and beyond what they were before that point. So they're all gearing up for the big war that's going to happen. Okay, so while the Starleague Defense Force is static and then losing soldiers because of fighting out in the Rimworld's Republic to deal with Amorous' backup forces and then fighting their way to Terra, the houses are gearing up for war. They're arming themselves above and beyond anything they've ever had. And so they've got the armaments, they've got their cause. I believe the phrase is Cassius Belli.
Yes.
In the whole, like, no, I'm the First Lord. No, I'm the First Lord.
Yes.
You know?
That is one thing the Crusader Kings video games have taught me. Cassius Belli is what you invoke when you're like, I have the right to rule here.
Yeah, so essentially he knows it's a doomed endeavor. All that's going to happen is his soldiers are going to die, or they're going to defect and actually make the coming war worse because they're going to add their personnel and material to the war machine. So he's like, no, we've done enough for these people. We've honored our obligations. Peace out.
Seems like a little cowardly.
I mean, the House Lords voted to strip him of his title. Like, at that point, he's not even abandoning his post. His post doesn't exist anymore.
He could have just went and backed up the Comstar guys.
No, the Comstar guys, they were like, we're taking Earth. That's it. Leave us alone. We'll make sure your phones keep working.
I think I read that the guy who took over Comstar after the Amherst coup, I can't remember the guy's name.
Jerome Blake.
Yes. He wanted Kerensky to declare himself as the Star Lord.
He did. Yeah, he tried to convince him to.
He just...
Yeah, everyone tried to. I think it's kind of hinted that even whoever was ruling House Lao at that point was kind of like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you should just claim the throne. Like, I think it was the ruler of House Lao that was the only one that was kind of like, man, I really hoped it wouldn't come to this as far as the big war. Which is amazing given what Lao winds up becoming later on after the insanity takes hold. But
well, they all think they're gods, and the only people really that should be breeding with the gods is, well, the Targaryen way. Let's put it that way.
That's a very recent addition, and probably as a result of Game of Thrones. But anyway, yeah, I mean that's the way he looked at it. So there is a somewhat official alternate universe where they don't leave.
And what happens in that one?
In that one, they basically reforged the Terran hegemony. I don't remember what they called it. I think it had a different name. But Kerensky gets assassinated on the eve of leaving, and De Chevalier declares himself leader, and it's like, we're not going anywhere. Like, this far, basically gives the Picard Borg speech, the this far and no farther from first contact.
Yeah.
And they hold the line, and then you see it now, and a lot of the familiar names are still there. The people that were the Khans, most of them are now generals and whatnot in the military. The main difference is there's no succession war, so things weren't bombed into oblivion.
So they have nice shiny new mechs.
So everyone has lots and lots of nice shiny new mechs, and lots of mechs. Period. Like warships, the whole 9 yards. They've got everything still, but they don't have clan technology.
So no double heat sinks.
Because the clans
no EL PPCs.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff like that. So the whole thing though is there's a ship from the main universe that misjumps and winds up there. And so, like, the scientists get on board and start looking at their mechs and are like, what's all this crap you guys have in this? Like, what are these double heat sinks? And, like, what is all this? Where the hell are you people from?
What is with this weird target imaging system?
Yeah, and so it probably sparks a massive like arms race, and yeah, but it's a whole like alternate universe thing that they came up with. Empires of Flame is what it's called. If you get folks want to look it up, it's on the Catalyst website. I believe the main book is free. Check there or Drive Through RPG. It's just a PDF. It doesn't have a physical book, but it's one of the like legit like they created it alternate reality things. So
it's their attempt to add more sci-fi to this science fiction setting.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of sci-fi stuff.
Well, but there's not a lot of sci-fi tropes.
No. I mean, there's...
Like aliens.
No, there's no aliens. Because
threats from the great beyond. It's threats from the inside.
Yeah, humans are enough of a problem. You don't need outside threats. The clans are the aliens.
Right up until the Cameron show.
The whole like just their culture, their genetic program, like these are the aliens. Okay.
So I'm going to guess none of these books like verify or deny that possibly one of the people that went on the Exodus was a Cameron.
I think they kind of hem-haw around. It's Kerensky's wife. They hem-haw around about who she really is, because she takes up like a dozen different identities through the books. So, yeah. Yeah. So,
but no, there is hints in some books that one of the higher ranking officials that went on the Exodus suddenly showed up with a daughter.
Yeah, well, her name is Jennifer Winson, and her brother is one of the members of the clans. And so, like, Ondari kind of says something about it at one point, and she's like, yeah, he's a pretty loyal guy, implying, like, yeah, I'm not his sister. You know, that's a cover. We picked someone that we knew would stick with it. So, but yeah. So, if you're interested at all about this kind of stuff, check these books out. They're available, you know, I'm assuming in a bookstore if you can find one of those. But also Amazon. I don't know if Drive Through RPG carries these or just the source books. And then also
Catalyst website.
Catalyst website should have them. And I believe the novels are like the source books, and that you'll also get the PDF for free if you buy them through the Catalyst website. Ooh. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's how it works. And also, there's a couple of guys, Fortress Miniatures and Ares Games, that are resellers that also carry the novels as well. So, yeah. So look for these and all the other, like, 100 some odd other novels. I haven't personally read any that I would say were bad, but I skipped the first like 4 or 5 in the Dark Age era, so, and I heard they were bad, so that's why I skipped them. But the others I've read are good, and I'll do some reviews for some of those down the road here. But leading into what we're going to be covering in the near future, I want to go ahead and start talking about the clans and their origins here. So there you have it, folks. If you like this and, you know, want to know more, make some comments down there, hit the like, subscribe. It's YouTube, you know what to do. So anyway, hopefully you guys got something out of this, and are along with our like 20 minutes of rambling here at the end.
You're expecting that from us though at this point, let's admit it.
Well, I mean, maybe. I was kind of hoping to just do the book review, but you know,
I had questions about it.
And they were valid questions. I'm not complaining. You know?
Like, you wouldn't...
Just that some of our videos we're going to be doing in the future are going to be long enough. Like, they're going to be like info dump videos.
I know.
There's going to be less commentary and more... So anyway, hope you folks enjoyed this, and we will see you guys later.